Morning, students. Today we're going to read the further paragraphs from the same chapter, Birth. So, here I'm going to start the paragraphs and I'll explain you. Inside, a narrow stair led up to a small bedroom, clean but poorly furnished. When it says poorly furnished, that means not too many things in the bedroom like expensive sofa set and center table, etc. And lit only by an oil lamp. Here, Mrs. Morgan's mother, a tall, grey-haired woman of nearly 70, and the stout, elderly midwife waited beside the patient, watching Andrew's expression as he moved about the room. So when Andrew entered the gate alone, because Joe didn't want to come along, he was quite nervous. He took the stairs, which were of rather small width, and reached a bedroom. The bedroom was not very furnished, very luxurious, but it was neat and clean. Inside the room were Joe Morgan's mother in law, a woman who must be around 70 years old, with larger than the average height and grey hair, along with a plump midwife to assist the childbirth. Midwife is a woman who helps during the pregnancy, labor, delivery. The midwife was also of an elderly age. They both sat beside Mrs. Morgan waiting for Andrew. "Let me make you a cup of tea, Dr. Batch," said the former quickly. Former quickly means the First Lady, Mrs. Morgan's mother. After a few moments, Andrew smiled faintly. He saw that the old woman, wise in experience, realized there must be a period of waiting, that she was afraid he would leave the case, saying he would return later. "Don't fret, mother, I will not run away." So the old lady, Mrs. Morgan's mother, she offered Dr. Andrew a cup of tea. She addressed Andrew as Batch, which is obviously just expression to use to show affection. Realizing that the old lady might be worried about him leaving during the waiting period, he gave her a gentle smile and tried to comfort her by assuring that he will not go away. The fact that she anticipated the period of waiting and was worried about him running away made Andrew realize that she was wise and had plenty of experience. Down in the kitchen, he drank the tea which she gave him. Overwrought as he was, he knew he could not snatch even an hour's sleep if he went home. He knew too that the case here would demand all his attention. A queer lethargy of spirit come upon him. Lethargy means laziness, lack of energy and spirit. He decided to remain until everything was over. So now, because the lady, she offered a tea, and he started sipping the tea in the kitchen downstairs. He was mentally and physically exhausted because of the, I told you earlier that he had unpleasant meeting with her girlfriend Christine. He knew it was impossible for him to even get an hour's sleep if he had gone to his home. Although new in his medical profession, he was aware that the situation was critical and called for his all the expertise, and he had to be attentive. Strangely, he felt a bit active and decided to stay at the place till his duty was fulfilled. An hour later, he went upstairs again, noted the progress made, came down once more, sat by the kitchen fire. It was still, except for the rustle of a cinder in the grate. Cinder is a small piece of, burnt coal which you put in the fireplace. So what he saw there, except for the rustle of a cinder in the grate and the slow tick-tock of the wall clock, that means there was a pin drop silence, so you could hear the voice of the wall clock tick-tock, and there was a small piece of coal burning in the fireplace. No, there was another sound, the boat of Morgan's footstep as he peaced in the street outside. And also he could hear the Joe Morgan's footsteps because he was outside and eagerly waiting for the outcome. The old woman opposite him sat in her black dress, quite motionless, her eyes strangely alive and wise, probing, never leaving his face. His thoughts were heavy, muddled. The episode he had witnessed at Cardiff station still obsessed him morbidly. He thought of Bramwell, foolishly devoted to a woman who deceived him sordidly, of Edward Page, bound to the shrewish bloodline of Danny, living unhappily apart from his wife. His reason told him that all these marriages were dismal failures. It was a conclusion which, in his present state, made him wince. He wished to consider marriage as an idyllic state. Yes, he could not otherwise consider it with the image of Christine before him. Her eyes, shining towards him, admitted no other conclusion. It was the conflict between his level, doubting mind and his overflowing heart which left him resentful and confused. He let his chin sink upon his chest, stretched out his legs, stared broodingly into the fire. He remained like this so long, and his thoughts were so filled with Christine that he started when the old woman opposite suddenly addressed him. Her meditation had pursued a different course. If you remember, in the summary video, I explained that how bad time he had, unpleasant moments with his girlfriend Christine, and now it was still haunting him. Whatever the incident took place at the Cardiff station, and he also began to think of his friends and acquaintances who have had bad experiences in love and marriage. He thought of Bromwell, the woman he loved had cheated on him. So he thought of his one of his friends whose name was Bromwell, and the woman he loved, she had cheated him. He cheated him that way. And also he thought about Edward Page, who was committed to a dominating woman named Blodwen. He reflected upon how Danny is living away from his wife not so happily. All of this brought him to an inference that made him cringe. He wished to be believed that the institution of marriage was a cheerful one that guaranteed peace and companionship. He also had no other reason to believe otherwise. With Christine's shining eyes in his mind, he was undoubtedly facing a conflict with all his mind, heart, and soul in disagreement. So basically, he was confused. He was confused. He was facing conflict um, uh, with his mind and heart. He was so sometimes he was thinking his all was good, and sometimes it's that there were so many problems in relationship, in marriages and relationship. So he thus rested his chin on his chest and pulled out his legs while he glanced at the fireplace. He sat still for few moments. His mind was still, thinking about Christine when the old lady came, and she just broke his silence. She was thinking about something else. Suzanne said not to give her the chloroform if it would harm the baby. She's awful set upon this child, Dr. Bash. Her old eyes warmed at a sudden thought. She added in low tone, we all are, I fancy. He collected himself with an effort. It won't do any harm. The anesthetic is like chloroform, when doctor gives to patient during the treatment procedure, operation, etc. He said kindly, they'll be all right. So that lady who started talking, she told the doctor how worried Suzanne was, the woman who was expecting baby, on account of this complicated situation. She didn't want to have anesthesia, the chloroform, if it were to affect the baby. And she also told him how invested she was in the child. The old lady corrects herself and says that all of them are invested in the child. In fact, all the family members were worried, and they did their best. Her eyes were filled with warmth while she said this. The doctor was he these things made him worried also, and somehow he cleared his mind and assured the lady that the chloroform, the anesthetic, would do no harm to either of them. An hour elapsed. It was a long Oh, sorry. Here, the nurse voice was heard calling for the top landing. Andrew glanced at the clock, which now showed 3:30. He rose and went up to the bedroom. He perceived that he might now begin his work. So now he heard the nurse was calling from the top, from the upstairs, and then Andrew looked at the wall clock, and it was showing the time 3:30. So he got up and went to the bedroom. And looking at the situation, he thought that he might begin his work. An hour elapsed. It was long, harsh struggle. Then, as the first streaks of dawn strayed past the broken edges of the blind, the child was born, lifeless. So, after an hour, it took almost an hour to perform the surgery, and it was a lot of efforts made by the doctor and the nurse and everybody. So then finally the child was born, but it was lifeless. It was not moving. His hands, legs are crying as usually a born child does. As he glanced at the still from, a shiver of horror passed over Andrew. After all that he had promised, his face heated with his own exertions, chilled suddenly. He hesitated, torn between his desire to attempt to resuscitate the child and his obligation towards the mother, who was herself in a desperate state. The dilemma was so urgent he did not solve it consciously. Blindly, instinctively, he gave the child to the nurse and turned his attention to Suzanne Morgan, who now lay collapsed, almost pulseless, and not yet out of the ether upon her side. His haste was desperate, a frantic race against her ebbing strength. It took him only an instant to smash a glass ampoule and inject the medicine. Ampoule is, you must have seen the small injection, the glass injection. And in fact, well, it's medicine basically. Inject, you call it when you inject the medicine into a human body. Then he plunged down the hypodermic syringe and worked unsparingly to restore the flaccid woman. After few minutes of feverish effort, her heart strength, he saw that he might safely leave her. He swung around in his shirt sleeves, his hair sticking to his diaphragm. So, if you remember the summary I explained earlier, when the child was born, it was lifeless, and also the mother, Suzanne, she was laid unconscious. So, Dr. Andrew, he couldn't think of doing what, because both of were needed treatment. So he had to decide who to treat first. So he decided to treat the mother first. So as he continued to look at the lifeless child, and he couldn't, understand what to do. So first he had to decide whether he needed to treat the woman or the child first. Moreover, he was confused. He couldn't get himself to choose between addressing the stillborn or the miserable mother. He could not make the decision consciously. So he ensured what he did. He just took the he addressed the mother first while giving the child to the nurse. So he given the child to nurse, and he started treating the woman first. Susan laid unconscious too, as the effects of anesthesia still persisted. Anesthesia, I told you, the chloroform. He put in all his efforts to bring her out of the desperate state, even while her strength continued to weaken. He instantly broke the medicine's glass to fill the syringe and inject it into her body. He worked tirelessly to bring her to her senses. After a moment, when he was assured that she was safe and her body was beginning to regain its strength, he turned his attention to the child. His hair was all over his sweaty face, but he did not waste another time. "Where's the child?" The midwife made a frightened gesture. She had placed it beneath the bed in a flash, and he knelt down. Flushing amongst the sodden newspapers below the bed, he pulled out the child, a boy perfectly formed. The limp, warm body was white and soft as tallow. The card, hastily slashed, lay like broken stem. The skin was of lovely texture, smooth and tender. The head lolled on the thin neck. The limbs seemed boneless. So that's all for today, and don't forget to watch the next part of the videos. And that will finish the chapter. Hope to see you again. Bye bye for now.